Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to the HKSSC Webinar 8, Tuna Fisheries Management, Issues and Partnerships for Improvement. I am the administrator here today. My name is Aaron Sloan, and I'll be joined by Jackie Dixon, our technical advisor. Both of us are part of the Hong Kong Sustainable Seafood Coalition, and this webinar is run as one of our open webinars. The webinar content is decided by our membership in coordination with the steering committee. Today, we'll be running through a brief introduction of the Seafood Coalition. We'll then have our webinar, which will take up the bulk of the session. And then finally, we'll present you with what's coming up next and ways to get involved with the Secretariat and with the coalition. As a reminder, the slides will be shared upon request today, so you don't need to try and screen grab your way through it. We'll also upload this video for anybody who has to drop off through the call or through the webinar to the website and also to our YouTube channel, which we've recently set up. Links for that will be provided on our LinkedIn too. As a reminder to everybody that we run these webinars under Chatham House rules. Therefore, if you want to put any questions in, put the questions into the question box on your panel on the right-hand side of your screen. No other members can see what you're typing or what you're asking. There's no stupid questions. And as we've got such a stellar lineup today, we really appreciate you asking as many questions as possible. Don't be shy to ask. Moving on then, just a brief introduction about the coalition itself. We're a coalition of industry members aiming to advance the sustainable seafood market in Hong Kong through good sourcing practices. In essence, that means we provide a practical and collaborative way to demonstrate responsible sourcing. We provide tools and support, and really our mission and our vision then is for all seafood imported into Hong Kong to be legal, traceable, and biologically sustainable. To give you a brief idea about who's involved with the coalition so far, here's a snapshot of our membership. And if you have any interest in becoming a member yourself or learning more about how we might be able to support you in responsible sourcing, please do reach out to the Secretariat at the email at the bottom of this page. With that brief introduction then, I'm going to pass over to our technical advisor, Jackie Dixon. She will be leading this discussion today and introducing our different speakers that we have. So Jackie, with that, I'll pass over to you.
Thank you, Aaron. Thanks very much for that introduction, and welcome to everyone here to our webinar today on tuna. We decided to focus the webinar this month on tuna species because the Hong Kong Sustainable Seafood Coalition membership expressed interest in better understanding the tuna stocks in the world, how they are managed, and what buyers and traders can do to ensure sustainable tuna procurement and trading. We all know how important tuna is in terms of global seafood trade. We've got a lot of canned and other shelf-stable tuna products providing plentiful and inexpensive protein to markets around the world, while we have smaller amounts of high-quality tuna steaks and sashimi making their way to more affluent markets. So this trade supports both industrial fishing as well as artisanal in tropical and temperate seas, and is a very, very important part of the global seafood trade. Yet not all of us are necessarily aware of how complex the trade is and how multi-jurisdictional management of these highly migratory species are, and the degree to which different tuna species are being managed and the status of the various stocks in the world, which is why we are organizing this webinar today, because of the interest expressed by the Hong Kong Sustainable Seafood Coalition membership, but also we know this will be of significant interest to the Hong Kong marketplace in general. So today we're going to be bringing you experts who are at the heart of the scientific management and conservation efforts of tuna. Some of them are leading on engagements in the science world. Others are engaging with NGOs, while others focus on the tuna supply chain and retailers and buying end to bring a collective voice to the table. And we're going to start by looking at the bigger picture. So let's first take a look at the stock status of these very important species. So I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Hilario Murua, who is the senior scientist at the International Seafood Sustainability Foundation. And Hilario has 25 years of experience working on fish population dynamics, assessment and management. He is a member of the International Commission for the Conservation of Atlantic Tunas, ICCAT for short, and the Indian Ocean Tuna Commission on the scientific committee there, where he was the chair for a few years between 2015 and 2018. He also chaired the Tropical Tunas Working Party of the IOTC from 2010 to 2014 and was the rapporteur for Big Eye Tuna at ICCAT, also for a few years from 2015 to 2018. And he regularly attends the working groups on ecosystem and bycatch. So he really is the perfect person to give us this bigger picture perspective on tuna stocks and how they are managed. So Hilario, let me pass over to you. Any questions for Hilario and the other speakers, please just hold them until the end, put them into the questions box, and then at the end of the speaker panels, we're going to have a Q&A session. So we won't do it after every speaker, we'll hold the questions to the end. But please do put them into the question box while Hilario is speaking and we will capture those. Great, thanks Hilario, over to you.
Thank you, Jackie. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and I hope you are staying well and safe in these challenging times. First of all, thank you very much to Hong Kong Sustainable Seafood Coalition for inviting us to participate in this interesting webinar. It is a great pleasure to be part of this initiative. I don't know what happened. I'm trying to go to now. It's taking some time. Today, I'm going to present the status of the world tuna stocks. But first, I will make a brief introduction of what the International Seafood Sustainability Foundation is. Then, I will introduce the tuna regional fishery management organizations that are responsible to manage tuna fisheries. Sorry, but the slides are not moving on now. So then I will introduce the tuna regional fishery management organizations that are responsible to manage tuna fisheries, the highly migratory species, transboundary species, which make their assessment and management quite challenging. Then I will present a quick overview of tuna catches worldwide. And finally, I will review the tuna status of the stocks. We are in 29 recognized tuna scientists, leaders in industry and environmental champions launched the International Seafood Sustainability Foundation based on shared concerns about the future of tuna fisheries and a desire to do something about it together. And the together is very important for ISSF. ISSF mission is to undertake and facilitate science-based initiatives for the long-term conservation and sustainable use of global tuna stocks, reducing bycatch and promoting tuna ecosystem health. And to deliver our mission, a strategic plan was designed to implement and address ISSF objectives through our strategic pillars and core area of focus. So in short, our objective is to improve the sustainability of global tuna stocks by developing and implementing verifiable science-based practices, commitments, and international management measures. And for that, we cooperate with and support regional fishery management organizations and advocate to RFMO members for the adoption and implementation of science-based management measures so that tuna stocks and their ecosystems are managed comprehensively and sustainably. In our strategic plan, we have three pillars: science, influence, and verification. In science, our focus is to support and promote, as I said before, science-based approaches to improve global tuna stock health, monitor and report on their status, and to promote comprehensive science-based approaches to bycatch mitigations across global tuna fisheries and gear types. We also support and promote efforts to proactively eliminate illegal, unreported, and/or unregulated fishing practices and to eliminate excess fishing capacity to facilitate the conservation and management of tuna resources. With regard to the influence, the second pillar, our objective is to exercise influence and advocacy among stakeholders to promote the adoption of science-based, enforceable, and implementable measures to advance the sustainability of tuna stocks. For example, we press and support the RFMOs and member nations, as well as national governments, to adopt science-based management measures. And we engage with NGOs, market vessels, and other stakeholders to promote the sustainability efforts. And the third pillar of verification, we verify through a third-party audit process that our participating companies comply with all ISSF conservation measures adopted as a result of previous work on science and resulting best practices. And we communicate the results publicly to promote transparency. And we also track compliance by fishing vessels participating in the proactive vessel register that we created, because participating companies should buy from those vessels which comply with ISSF conservation measures as a means for promoting and enhancing real practical change in the waters. And this tool, the proactive vessel register, is very important because that is why we promote changes, real changes in the water. As the vessels registered in this list, they need to follow our conservation measures. In summary, science is our guide. Science drives the ISSF. More than 70% of our budget goes towards original collaborative research. Our research leads to policies and practices that promote better fishery management. We side with the facts, not the funders. All of our sponsors respect our independence. We clear the way for collaboration. We value the interest and expertise of all of our stakeholders, scientists, NGOs, governments and foundations, as well as fishing, processing, retail, and food service companies. And through ISSF, many voices speak. Working together, our stakeholders develop science-based policies and practices that get proven results. And as said before, this process is translated in ISSF conservation measures on the left that participating companies need to comply with, from bycatch mitigation to product traceability. ISSF participating companies are committed to complying with our conservation measures, driving positive changes directly in the water. And you can find all our conservation measures in this web address. So what is our approach to science? I need to wait until the slide is coming. We collaborate with scientists to get possible or crazy ideas, and met with the skipper to see if those ideas make sense in the water. Then, those that have some possibility, we trial them, and if they have potential, we develop best practices and advocate for the adoption of those best practices in regional fishery management organizations. For example, we have been advocating for the use of only non-entangling fats without nets in the last years. And to discuss those ideas and others with skippers, in the last 11 years, we have organized around 90 skipper workshops around the world in the main fishing ports, with more than 2,750 skippers and crew members participating in those skipper workshops, where we share our ideas, we discuss possible ideas with skippers, and we also advocate for the implementation of the best practices in the vessels. We also organize and fund several research activities at sea, and in the last 11 years, around 23 research activities on research cruises, from acoustic mitigation to the development and deploying biodegradable fats have been conducted. And you can see here in this slide where those research cruises took place. Now I'm going to move to describing briefly the tuna regional fishery management organizations. for the management of tuna region, for the management of tuna fisheries and tuna stocks. There are international tuna regional fishery management organizations with the mandate to maintain tuna stocks in sustainable levels. There are 5 tuna RFMOs. The IATTC, the Inter-American Tropical Tuna Commission in the Eastern Pacific, that was created in La Jolla in 1949. The second one that was created was the ICCAT, International Commission for the Conservation of Atlantic Tunas in the Atlantic Ocean. The next one, the CCSBT, the Commission for the Conservation of Southern Bluefin Tuna. This RFMO just managed one species in the southern oceans of the Atlantic, Pacific, and Indian Ocean. The Indian Ocean Tuna Commission in the Indian Ocean, and the Western and Central Pacific Fishery Commission in the Western and Central Pacific Ocean, that is the largest regional fishery management organization of tunas. They manage 7 species and 23 stocks of tunas. Stock is the management unit of main commercial tuna species. Yellowfin, skipjack, and bigeye, which are considered tropical tunas and are distributed in the tropical region of the 3 oceans. And bluefin tuna and albacore tuna, which are called also the temperate tunas. As Jackie said, those species and stocks are highly migratory stocks, and there are transboundary stocks, and international management and collaboration is needed to manage properly those stocks. The tuna RFMOs also manage other tuna-like species and the species caught in tuna fisheries, such as sharks and turtles, and therefore they need to also promote and provide mitigation measures for the bycatch. And what is the status of the world fisheries for tuna? Using information from the RFMO scientific committees, ISSF updates the status of the stocks, report 2-3 times each year for the 23 stocks of major commercial tunas. This report includes information of current catches by year and stock status under each RFMO. And no other organization does this. And you can find our reports in that web address. But not only we provide a technical report, we also created an ISSF status of tuna stocks iterative tool, which allows everyone to check the trend of the status of the stock of any particular tuna species, and also the total catches by year for that species or globally. You can find that interactive tool here, and I will encourage you to play with it a little bit around. Here you can see for all the species in all the regions what is the part of the catches that are coming from healthy stocks or for other type of stocks that are not as healthy and need some management measures. And also you can have information on the share of the total catch by year for each of the species in different regions. So this is located in that web address, and I encourage you to play it around a little bit. With regard to total tuna catches, as you can see in this slide, total tuna catches increased continuously from 1850 until around mid-2010. And the last year's total catches has been maintained between 4.5 million and 5 million tons. That is a quite large catches. By species, skipjack comprises around 58 of the total catches. Skipjack is the main species found in tuna cans. Yellowfin, 28% of total catches, which can be sold fresh, but mostly in cans. Bigeye, 8%, mainly for the sashimi market. Albacore, 5%, both for fresh and market and in cans. and bluefin tuna comprising around 1% of the total catches. Bluefin tuna mostly for sashimi and fresh market, smaller in catch but higher in price. By gear, the same information, but by gear, 65% of the catches are coming from pure seiners, mainly industrial pure seiners. 11 are caught by long line, 8% by pole and line, 4% by gill net, and 12% by other gears. The next slides will show the status of tuna stocks by species, but before having a review by species, just to say that globally, 84% of the catches comes from healthy stocks and 50% is the strong management. This is considering the catch coming from all stocks together. If we consider the number of stocks, I said that there are 23 stocks of main commercial tuna species. 65% of the stocks are at a healthy level of abundance, 70 are overfished, and 70 at intermediate level. And this is the summary of all the 23 stocks, 7 species and 23 stocks. And from this, we can say that all skipjack stocks are healthy, and all albacore stocks except in the Indian Ocean are healthy as well. And that a better management is needed for big eye in the Atlantic Ocean, Indian Ocean, and Eastern Pacific Ocean, yellowfin in the Eastern Pacific Ocean and Indian Ocean, and Pacific bluefin tuna. And now I will present the same information, but with more details by species. Here you can see that all the indicators for skipjack in all oceans are okay, or in other words, in green. And for each species stock, we have 2 indicators. Sorry, one related to fish abundance in the left here is, which gives information if there is enough fish in the water. And the other one relates to fishing effort mortality, which indicates if the catch is sustainable or not, or in other words, the fishing effort or mortality is too high or not. So green is okay, red is bad, and yellow is we are in an intermediate state. And this for all species. For skipjack, everything is okay. In all oceans, the stocks are in good health. For albacore, as we saw in the summary, everything is okay except in the Indian Ocean. That indicates that too many fishes are caught. The abundance is still okay for Indian Ocean albacore, but if fish mortality is not reduced through management measures, the biomass will become in red status in the near future. So some management actions are needed to be adopted. In the case of Mediterranean albacore, a small stock, the biomass or fish in the water is low, but as the fishing mortality level is in green or is okay, it is expected that the biomass will recover in the near future. In the case of yellowfin, we have 2 stocks that are doing well or are healthy, and other 2 stocks that are in danger with a need of much more stronger management to allow their recovery. In the eastern, that is in the Eastern Pacific Ocean, and particularly in the Indian Ocean. In the case of big eye, we have 1 stock being well managed in the Western Central Pacific Ocean, another in risk with a need of stronger management to allow its recovery. That is the big eye of the Atlantic Ocean. And in 2 stocks, they are in a situation where the biomass or number of fishes are in the water are okay or a healthy state, but the fishing mortality is too high, which should be reduced as soon as possible to maintain the stock in sustainable levels. Otherwise, if those fishing effort indicator or fishing mortality indicator are maintained in red, then the stock will become, the biomass will become also in a bad shape or will become in red. In the case of bluefin tuna, we have 1 stock in danger is that the plastic bluefin tuna, and it's very low levels of biomass. And the other three are recovering with fishing mortality at sustainable levels, in green, the fishing mortality of fishing effort, but the biomass being still too low. The biomasses of those three species, or three stocks, sorry, is recovering from situations where the stock were severely depleted in the past. And now, due to stronger management measures, they are rebuilding. And this is basically a summary of summaries to illustrate the status of the stocks relative to their maximum sustainable yield of each stock. And you can see that, you can observe that the skipjack stocks are the most productive ones, and all are in green because they have a larger rectangle, so they are more productive, they are producing more fish, so they are having a larger maximum sustainable yield, and followed by the yellowfin, with some species or some stocks in green, like in the Western Central Pacific, but others in red, like in the Indian Ocean and the Eastern Pacific Ocean. And the last slide, the same, but in relation to total catches. As seen before, most of the catches are coming from healthy stocks, skipjack, and some of the healthy yellowfin stocks. And this is all. I will be more than happy to answer any question at the end of the whole presentation. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very, very much, Hilario. That was a really very good overview for us to paint a bigger picture. Your diagrams on the 5 different tuna species are really straightforward and easy to comprehend, which is fantastic sometimes, given that some of the science can come across as so complex and difficult to comprehend, but actually you paint a very simple picture there. So thank you for that. So we're going to hold off on questions for Hilario until the end. So if any questions anyone has on some of the science on the tuna stocks, then please do put it into the questions box. We will also have Holly Kuhler joining the call later on. She's the Vice President for Policy and Outreach at the ISSF. She's really the person to speak to about membership and exploring relationships with ISSF if anyone is interested in getting involved with them. So she's going to join us at the Q&A session at the end because of the timing difference in the US. It's incredibly early where she is at the moment. Great, so thank you, Hilario. So now let's turn to the views of the NGO community. So I'm just going to ask Robin Teets to come on, to put his webcam on. Great, thanks, Robert. So Robin is the project lead for the NGO Tuna Forum. And this brings NGOs, individuals, and organizations together to elevate inter-NGO engagement where possible on core focus areas. And this includes RFMO management and advocacy, market-based mechanisms for improving sustainability, and on-the-water research activities and improvements. Robin is a seasoned facilitator and strategic planner, and he has extensive experience in helping organizations and multi-stakeholder groups surface opportunities and issues and to find common ground, which is required to move some of these opportunities forward to improve fisheries and ocean ecosystems. Okay, so Robin, I'm going to hand over to you now. Thanks very much.
Great, thanks, Jackie, and thank you everyone for giving me the opportunity to speak with you all this evening and afternoon or evening, I suppose, depending on where you are. So as Jackie said, I'm going to give you a bit of an overview of what the Global NGO Tuna Forum is and what our priorities are, the issues, and how we actually align on those priorities, and then also how we try to increasingly are engaging market actors, market partners in collaborative or coordinated efforts to move forward on a number of those priorities. So let me just make sure I can start moving the slides. Perfect. So first, a little bit about what the Tuna Forum is. I think first and foremost, I need to say this is not an organization. So it doesn't have a charter, it doesn't have a logo. It is really a collection of NGOs started in 2017 or so, and at that point there were maybe 13 or 14 NGOs, and these were all NGOs that worked on tuna sustainability issues from a global perspective that came together in order to sort of work to determine if they could find common ground. Most of the organizations at that time had their own positions on a number of different issues. While they were very similar, it felt particularly to RFMOs and to some market actors as a bit more of a cacophony than something was coordinated. So the groups decided that they wanted to get together. This initiative was requested by them and is still directed by all of them. The priorities that we focus on are picked by this number of organizations, which is now almost doubled. It's up to about 27, and I'll share that with you in a moment. And then it's coordinated independently. That's me. It also happens to be funded independently as well, and that's part of the model in and of itself. So it's not really an organization. It is truly a forum, and it is it has been formed primarily, and our focus is on elevating that NGO engagement on issues and advocacy, particularly to RFMOs, and various actions that we can take as well to coordinate and collaborate on areas where we have common ground, but that are also supportive of the individual actions of the NGO organizations. It's a venue where we close the doors, real or these days virtual, and have the discussions, have the debates, and there are very much debates. But we understand that those debates happen with a purpose, that we're working toward coordinated goals and messaging and actions where possible. Our goal is to get to the highest possible common denominator where we have it. And I'll talk a little bit about how we do that in a second. Who can participate? So it is primarily NGOs, excuse me, there are a few individuals and other conservation organizations as well. This all happens by invitation that work comprehensively on global tuna sustainability issues. I will also say that there are some groups that are now part of the forum because of our 5 priorities. There are some groups that join because they are experts, and they're not necessarily focused on tuna issues globally, but they are experts on a very specific priority. And that has been very useful to the forum as we've sort of grown and matured in our efforts. Participants, once invited in and joining and participating in the forum, they decide where they participate and where they don't. So they can engage on certain topics and certain work streams and not engage on others. It is the choice of the individual organizations where they want to bring their focus based on the alignment with their organization's priorities and objectives. We do bring outside expertise in from time to time. We've hosted a number of panels over the course of time on a number of different topics. That's been very useful to help inform the forum. But generally speaking, it is conservation organizations, primarily NGOs. And like the coalition, the Hong Kong Sustainable Seafood Coalition, we also conduct all meetings under Chatham House rules as well in order to truly provide the opportunity to have honest and open dialogue. Jackie touched on this. The breadth of what we focus on is relatively broad. So we do a fair amount of engagement with RFMOs and advocating to RFMOs. And we have a number of organizations who are primarily focused on that work. We have others that really focus more on market-based approaches to improving sustainability, and yet others still, including, as you just heard from Hilario, ISSF, that also does, and a number of other organizations that also do a lot of research and activities on water as well. And then of course we have many organizations that do 2 or more of these, but we, in all of our efforts and all of our priorities, we tend to try to focus across these 3 broad categories. This is a question that I think is probably the #1 question that I get in relation to the Global NGO Tuna Forum is who. So as I mentioned, we started with about 13 or 14 different organizations, and at that time, almost all of them were focused very broadly on the suite of tuna sustainability issues. And I've explained a little bit how that has evolved over time. This is a current list We started out as being very North American centric. I think we have much greater European centric representation now, and we are beginning to get increased representation in Asia. I have actually 4 organizations across Asia who are interested in joining and whom we're having discussions with right now that may end up being a part of this forum by the end of the year. The column on the right is actually a collection of funders that are actively engaged in the forum as well. We find that to be very important. So those are philanthropic organizations that support tuna sustainability efforts. The top one, which is in bold, if you can tell, the Packard Foundation, is the current funder of the NGO Tuna Forum. So that's the third-party funding to go along with the third-party coordination. So how it works. So these are, the groups that participate in the forum obviously have a tremendous amount of expertise. They are obviously the ones that are best to define what our priority issues are and how we will focus on them. And we really do that not just based on, okay, what are the most important issues that need to be addressed in global tuna fisheries, but then we weigh that against where does coordinated and collaborative effort, where could that have the greatest effect? And that's how we've landed on the priorities on which we've focused. It's also important to know this is not a consensus-driven organization. We do have consensus actually on a couple of issues, but that's not necessarily the goal. Every group doesn't have to participate or support every action, initiative, or work stream. We talk about coalitions of the willing. When we have enough, if we have a big enough coalition of the willing, it's a dozen, 15, 20 of those organizations that are supportive of a particular policy, position, action, then we move forward and the groups choose, all groups have an opportunity to influence where we land and what we focus on, but they ultimately choose for themselves whether they are supportive of the work or not. And so that kind of brings me to how we approach alignment, if you will, given that, again, we don't have to have consensus. It's more coalition of the willing approach. So there's sort of 3 categories. Let me click one more time. 3 categories. There's the support and endorse category. This really would be the coalition of the willing. Think of it as if there's some product that results from all of this, you'd put your logo on it and actively endorse it. So that is where we get to the coalition of the willing model. And typically on most issues, that is where most of the participants fall. That said, there are also a fair amount depending on the topic, there can be a fair amount that fall into the middle category, which for various reasons mean they participated in the process of determining where we would be. They have influenced the outcome, but for whatever reason, cannot publicly support the campaign. Sometimes it's just as simple as it's a topic that's just not in the remit of their individual organizations. Sometimes it's because they 90% agree, but there's something in there that they can't put, that they can't actually endorse. We consider this okay. Every now and then, by the way, below that red line, we do get the outright disagreement on a couple of issues. Our goal through all of this, any of the 3 categories, is to clearly understand the position of all the organizations, number one, and then understand, probably more importantly, understand why. When we really get to the why do you support, or more importantly, why do you not support things, we often find ways forward that we didn't see before. So that's sort of how we work in a nutshell. So now I wanted to share with you a little bit about those priority areas of focus. And again, I want to reiterate, we're talking about 26, 27, I believe, NGOs at this point, and perhaps more coming along as well. Getting 26, 27 groups with very strong opinions and individual approaches to tuna sustainability to agree can be difficult. We really seek this highest common denominator based on that convergence of the issues that are most important and where we think coordinated and collaborative effort could have the greatest impact. Oh, pardon me. It may take a second here. So what I want to share first is I'll share with you our priorities that have evolved over the course of the past 3 years. We set them quite early in this process and have been working on them since. And then I also want to share with you how we are evolving some of those areas of focus moving forward. So all of our priorities fall under one or more of the 3 categories you see on the screen: stock and ecosystem management. And Hilario did a fantastic job of giving you an overview of where the tuna stocks lie. I should also point out very briefly, as he noted, the Global NGO Tuna Forum does not specifically focus on bluefin tuna. We do focus on the big 4 tuna stocks, and as you saw in the one chart, in the pie chart, that is where the vast majority of the fishing occurs. That's where we focus, and the bluefin piece, which maybe we'll talk about in the Q&A, has a very different set of issues and focus. So I just want to clarify that as well, that we're talking about the big 4: skipjack, albacore, big eye, and yellowfin. So we focus on stock and ecosystem management, obviously, to try to ensure the long-term sustainability of tuna stocks. That is a priority of every organization, I think, that participates in the NGO Tuna Forum. We focus on issues of information and data, critical issue in global tuna fisheries, to provide more specific knowledge that is required to make sound management decisions and also to support compliance. This is a bit of a weak area in many ways in global tuna sustainability, the data and the information. So I'm sure you've probably heard this scenario, like you don't want to do surgery with a saw, you want to do it with a scalpel. We need the data so that we're not attacking stock and ecosystem management with a saw, we're tackling it with a scalpel. There's a lot we don't know. And that also brings into the transparency piece. Transparency is critical to ensure compliance and to further inform those management decisions as well. Another weak point in certain tuna fisheries around the globe in particular is transparency. In a lot of ways, we have dark places in the global tuna supply chains where we don't have clarity. To us, this is a critical issue moving forward. So, current priorities. As I mentioned, we have 5. We focus on, and in fact, this was the first area of agreement, first, comprehensive precautionary harvest strategies. So we put the rules in place in advance, essentially, so that on those predetermined set of rules, we can proactively manage tuna stocks based on where they sit at the moment, their status, so on and so forth, minimizes bias. Again, setting the rules in advance makes it easier. We focus on FADs. So FADs, fish aggregating devices, are a pretty substantial area of non-alignment, we shall say, among NGOs. That said, we've been able to find a path forward across a substantial coalition of the willing to sort of help address the issue and impacts of FADs, with the goal being to put and acknowledge the practices that, if all put in place, would result in well-managed FAD use. So we're very much focused on that. The third issue that relates directly to stock and ecosystem management is bycatch mitigation, and we focused our focused our efforts, on longline related bycatch mitigation, because the group felt that was an area where there were a large number of issues and that perhaps was not being acknowledged and addressed as much as bycatch issues elsewhere. That is changing, as I'll share with you in a second. Our focus, that is changing in relation to bycatch mitigation, though it remains a priority. And then we have 2 issues that really cross that data, that sort of data pillar and the transparency pillar. The first is our call to RFMOs to implement 100% observer coverage in industrial tuna fisheries. By industrial, which is specifically chosen language, we mean broadly the large-scale tuna fishing. Not that we don't believe observer coverage ultimately needs to be included everywhere, but we start where the greatest impact is required. Again, we need observer coverage so that we can get the data. And we also need it because again, we have dark places in the supply chain that we need to shine the light on. Very important. We understand that this is both human observers and electronic monitoring, and actually it's the rise of electronic monitoring in addition to human observers that really make this possible. There certainly are barriers to this, but the barriers are all barriers that we can overcome. They're really, we feel, is not an excuse to, there's no valid excuse not to move forward with observer coverage so that we can understand what happens from the water all the way to the shelf and the plate. Transshipment is another area where if it's not well managed and there's not transparency, we can't see the full picture. We need transparency in at-sea transshipment to provide greater clarity of what's actually being caught, bycatch. All of this again supports effective management, and it also helps. Again, this is another area where particularly we occasionally get some dark places in the supply chain, so we can help mitigate IUU among other factors. These are our priorities, and we can go into them in more detail if you're interested. And we have some experts, frankly, on this panel that could talk about it even better than I can. This is where we focus our advocacy efforts to RFMOs and also our outreach to the topics on which we focus outreach to market partners as well. Recently, and as recently as about 10 days ago, in fact, we got together as the full forum, nearly 50 individuals across those 27 organizations, and talked about these priorities and how we might want to evolve them moving forward. And I'm not sure here if I can get the slide to move forward. Yes, there we go. In terms of how we're going to evolve our focus on these priorities into 2021 and beyond. So I'll share with you sort of a bit of an update on where we are. So when it comes to stock and ecosystem management, still very much focused on precautionary harvest strategies. And I think we're going to have sort of a renewed energy and effort actually on that topic as well. Well-managed FADs and getting those practices in place. We will continue to focus on that. We'll be doing a review of those best practices in the next couple of months and be publishing any update that we might have in January or February of 2021. And then bycatch mitigation improvement as well, still an important priority. There is a working group attached to that that's really doing an assessment right now about where can we best focus the collaborative energies of the Tuna Forum on bycatch moving forward. So I think there'll be a bit of an evolution there, but still a very critical priority. Then we get to the priorities around data and information and transparency, which, as I mentioned, critically important. We are still focusing, of course, on 100% observer coverage in industrial tuna fisheries and at-sea transshipment best practices. But we realize this, and of course the groups know that there are a lot of issues here that are interconnected, and that perhaps we are ready as a collection of NGOs to focus in a more integrated and holistic way on issues of data, and transparency improvement. So that does mean 100% observer coverage in industrial tuna fisheries and better management of at-sea transshipment. But it also means addressing safety of human observers, which has been a consistent problem in a number of tuna fisheries. And then also electronic monitoring, which, as we know, those are the two components that get us to 100% observer coverage. You can't really do it without both. There's a lot of work that has gone on in relation to electronic monitoring. What this group will be doing in the coming months is really building some guidance for whether it be RFMOs or even for individual companies who are looking to implement electronic monitoring or require it within their tuna supply chains. But we want to look at it holistically, because when people think electronic monitoring, they think just cameras on boats. And of course, that is the starting point. But there are a lot of other issues around it as well. How do you get the data? Who gets the data? When do you get the data? Who owns the data? How do you use that data for both science, i.e. tuna stock management, and compliance as well? So our goal is to put in place guidelines. So if you are putting policies or protocols in place, these are the elements that you must include. So that work is going to be happening in the coming months. And then, of course, we're also going to start focusing a bit. We have a coalition of the willing that is interested in focusing on all the labor and social challenges that can exist in global tuna fisheries as well. So there's more to come on that topic as well, and I'd be happy to talk about that if you wish. All 5 priorities, as we are evolving them, we focus primarily on 2 elements. So first, we focus, of course, on RFMO and government advocacy, but we also are focusing on market engagement and activation. As we've been able to, over the course of time, these groups have been able to successfully land on common ground where they agree, and we have greater alignment than we've had before across NGOs. We have been working, particularly in the last year, 18 months, to reach out to the market partners, to engage them as well, to help support some of these priorities and encourage advocacy to RFMOs. So we've done a number of things. We've started with the simple, and you can see some of the lists or the bullet points on the screen in which we focus on market advocacy. We're going to be doing more of that, but in a more targeted effort. So we're very much looking to reach out to market actors to gain their support in that regard. But we're also increasingly going to be working with and reaching out to market partners on specific actions and asks that they themselves can implement or put in place in their own supply chains, as well as some market signals that they may be able to send where possible. And we've seen some recent movement on that in relation to our request for a yellowfin catch reduction plan in the Indian Ocean, with some great support from some retailers, primarily in Europe, where a lot of yellowfin is sold. So I'd be very happy to talk about how we're doing more of that. I'm cognizant that we're probably that we're running a little behind on time. So I will sort of refrain from going a little bit further, and I'll be happy to answer any questions when the time comes.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Robin, and sorry to rush you a little bit at the end. It's just we are almost on the hour.
No worries. No worries.
No, it's excellent. I mean, I could see you could talk forever on this topic, because it's very clearly you've been working for many years with these NGOs, and from my conversations with you, I understand it's taken quite a few years to get everyone on board and to align on the various asks and priorities. It's interesting to know which parts people do align on and where areas there's still disagreement. Okay, good. So if any NGOs are on the call, particularly from Asia, and they want to get in touch with Robin, please do. We'll also send the slides to all the delegates following this. It would be great to get more Asia-based NGOs involved in the conversation. Okay, so now let's shift a gear. Let's move towards the marketplace, and let's find out what some of the traders and buyers of tuna are working on globally. So our next speaker is Dr. Tom Pickerell. Tom is a marine biologist with nearly 20 years of experience in seafood sustainability, including wild fisheries and shellfish, aquaculture certification schemes, consumer guides, and social responsibility in seafood. Tom is the executive director of the Global Tuna Alliance, which is an independent group of retailers and supply chain companies, and he'll talk about that in a second. And before taking on this role, he was the Global Tuna Director for the Sustainable Fisheries Partnership, and he led SFP's fresh and frozen and canned tuna programs. Previous to that, he worked for multiple organizations, including Seafish, the UK Seafood Industry Authority, and also the Seafood Watch Program at Monterey Bay Aquarium, the Shellfish Association of Great Britain, WWF UK, and the UK government. So clearly a very, very experienced tuna expert. He's also a founder of a consulting company. So I'm going to now hand over to Tom, who's going to take you through the marketplace aspects. Thank you, Tom.
Great, thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here. So I'm going to talk about the global market for sustainable tuna and tie that into some of the work that we're doing at the Global Tuna Alliance to make things better. Okay. Just see how we advance this. Here we go. So what I'll be talking about, a quick brief introduction to the GTA, some of the key priorities we're working on and how that relates to the market impact, and then talk about finally Regional Fishery Management Organisation or RFMO engagement. Okay, so I'll get used to this time lag. So this is the current membership of the Global Tuna Alliance. You can see it's an awful lot of retailers and the suppliers that work with them. We've got retailers across Northwest Europe, including some of the big ones like Ahold Delhaize, Tesco's, Waitrose, Sainsbury's, Asda, etc. We also have some of their key suppliers, and we've also got one of the brands there, Prince's. We've also got two new members that I haven't had a chance to update this slide. We have Kelly Deli, which is a supplier of fresh and frozen tuna for sushi and sashimi that has many concessions in retailers, for example. We've also got Caterer's Choice, which is a food service supplier. So we're sort of broadening our remit, so moving away from not necessarily just the retail sector. We're also very keen to expand globally. We're having some conversations with retailers in Australia as well, but the wider our remit is, the more effective we can actually be. Originally, our work was focused on harvest strategies, and that's been covered by Robin earlier. Harvest strategies are long-term management plans for tuna, and essentially, instead of having annual debates about who gets what and what should the amount of tuna we catch be, long-term strategies, what they do is they set out a framework. So when you get to these discussions, it should be a reasonably automated process. You feed in the information about the fishery, and then it computes it, and it gives you the catches that each of the fleets can have. And that works very well. It's an effective form of fisheries management, and in fact, it's a core part of things like the Marine Stewardship Council standard. And all effectively managed fisheries around the world tend to have these in place. So that's been our focus. As you can see here, this is our 5-year strategy that was published just last month, and you can see it does still include harvest strategies there, because of course that still remains a key area for us. But there's also a lot of other areas that are going to be working on going forward, and that includes areas along transparency and traceability, some of which Robin mentioned, such as the 100% observer coverage and electronic monitoring. But we're also very keen to improve social responsibility in tuna fisheries, and there's a real opportunity for the market to put pressure on this, both through the supply chain and through government engagement, to ensure that social responsibility is improved. So I'm using here, this is a graph that shows the current status of tuna sustainability using something called Target 75. And as Jackie mentioned, I used to be the tuna director at the Sustainable Fisheries Partnership, and Target 75 is an initiative from the Sustainable Fisheries Partnership, or SFP. And what it says is, what we're aiming for is 75% of each of the key seafood sectors to be either sustainable or improving. And the definitions of sustainable are MSC or equivalent certifications, or rated green by the Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch program. And improving would be in a credible, comprehensive improvement project or fishery improvement project. And so, of course, for the aquaculture species, that would be something like an aquaculture improvement project. But these two graphs here show SS tuna and FF tuna. So SS is shelf stable, so that would be canned or pouched product, and FF is fresh and frozen tuna. So you can see, first of all, very quickly, that for shelf stable tuna, the situation is a lot better. There's way more sustainable tuna on the global marketplace. Now, this does not mean necessarily that the not improving is not sustainable. It either means that it hasn't been assessed by the Monterey Bay program, gone through MSC certification, or maybe it's in development towards that. But this gives you a snapshot of time that 31% of the global market of shelf-stable tuna could be considered sustainable using those metrics. For fresh and frozen, you'll see that it's a lot less. There's only 1% of production which is currently MSC certified or would meet the Seafood Watch green rating. There is about 11% improving as well, but the vast majority would be considered using this metric as not improving. The other thing to note is that while these pie charts are the same size, the volumes are completely different. You've got over 4 million metric tons of what we consider shelf-stable tuna here, and yet only almost a tenth of that, for fresh and frozen tuna. If you actually merge these together, this is the picture. And of course, it doesn't change a great deal from the situation with shelf stable because the volumes of fresh and frozen are so much less. But what you can see here is that on the global market of these 4 species that Robin noted before, we're not including bluefin in this, 27% would be considered sustainable and 13% would be considered improving. So just bear that in mind, because what we're going to do is relate that to the market very shortly. So the question is, tuna is it's a commercially important species. It's or group of species. It's probably the most valuable seafood product out there. So why are these figures so low? You would imagine that this would be a priority area. I'm using a graph here from the organisation that Hilario is from, the ISSF. Annually, the ISSF produce these reports, and they're incredibly useful. What they use is they take each of the tuna stocks and they run it through the Marine Stewardship Council standard. So what I'm looking at here is the first of the 3 pillars of the MSC, which is this one's related to the status of the stock. And what you can see very clearly from the top of the green bars, stock status, that the tuna stocks score very highly. There's only a few exceptions. You can see the Indian Ocean yellowfin, Atlantic bigeye, where the stock status, so that's the number of the fish in the water, is actually the problem. And this is because this is a fishery or fisheries that are in the high seas, and it's pretty difficult to overfish these. They can tend to reproduce quite well as well. So that's not the challenge here. And you can see information and monitoring, again, assessment of the stocks, pretty good with mainly greens and some of the yellows. So the green means it would be a condition-free pass. The yellow means there's still some work to do, but it would achieve certification with other some caveats. And that does relate to the fact that we have these management programs in place and observation programs. But you can see there is a big line of yellow and reds there under harvest strategies and harvest control rules. And harvest control rules are these rules I mentioned that are baked into the harvest strategy. So you can see this long-term management is what's causing the problem here. There are a number of fisheries that would actually fail the MSC based on this assessment. Now, of course, if you relate that to actual fisheries themselves, as opposed to this wider stock thing, there may be some changes there, but this gives you a good indication of what the challenges are. So what does it mean in the bigger picture? Well, bearing in mind the status of the stocks that we've looked at with them pie charts, the next couple of graphs show the actual market. So this first one is it's a bit dated now. The figures are from 2013, but it was difficult to get hold of these a little bit more recently. But this is the top producers of tuna that is destined for cans, and that would include things like skipjack and albacore. These are the big ones, and you can see here that Indonesia is the top. Now, Indonesia is the #1 producer of tuna. So then we have Philippines, Japan, Taiwan, the USA. So you can see that these are the producers. So this is where the tuna comes from originally. And if we switch that around, and what are the importers of canned tuna? Well, first thing you'll see is that it's quite a different situation. You can see the US is by far the largest importer of canned tuna, followed by Northwest and Western European countries, France, Spain, UK, Italy, Germany. We also see Italy there, Egypt there. Egypt is a big market for canned tuna. And I learned, quite surprisingly, that it's a big breakfast product in Egypt and other Middle Eastern countries. What you'll also notice on here is that in each of the line or each of the columns here, it breaks it down where the tuna comes from. Now, this doesn't align with the producers of tuna. So why is this? Why do we not see Indonesia called out on here, despite it being the top producer? And this is because a lot of this product goes to processing hubs. And Thailand, as you can see there, one of the largest ones, is a very big processing hub. So they take the produced tuna and then they process it into a form ready for canned, or actually into the cans themselves. So that's one of the challenges that we have with tuna, is that it's quite a complex market. Now, what this assessment did, it also broke down yellowfin and bigeye into, it classified that as fresh and frozen, but yellowfin is also a canned tuna. But let's just work with this at the minute. So again, you can see Indonesia, Philippines, and Spain, the top 3 producers of yellowfin and bigeye. Now, what do we see when we look at the markets for that? Who are the importers of fresh and frozen tuna? Japan, #1. And if you've ever been to Japan, you see the great breadth and depth of fresh and frozen tuna on the market, particularly for sushi and sashimi. It's no surprise to see them there. And again, You see some of the producers there, Taiwan, China. Again, there is another element of the processing hubs there. Now, if you look at some of these here, the seafood imports of fresh and frozen are processing hubs as well. You've got Thailand, Mauritius, Philippines, Ivory Coast. These do not import for their markets necessarily. They import for processing. And it's only of these top 10 here, it's only Japan, Spain, USA, and Italy really are the large end markets for fresh and frozen tuna. So when I said I would relay this to what does this all mean? So this graph here is the same information that's on the pie chart. So percentage of production, but again, broken it down to shelf stable and fresh and frozen. So it's the same information. What I've done here is I've added two lines, 47% and 83%. The 47% relates to markets that I would consider have developed sustainable seafood policies generally. So that the retailers, the food service companies have good or well-published sustainable seafood policies in place. And they include Northwest Europe, North America, Australia, for example. And so this is the demand from their markets. And you can see the demand exceeds the availability of tuna that would actually address those requirements. If we also add Southern European countries like Italy, Spain, we also add Japan, which have emerging sustainable seafood markets, it jumps up to 83%. And you can see there would be a huge gap between the market requirements and what is actually available on the global market. Shelf stable, it's a slightly different picture. You can see the 5.9, this is using the same metrics, the same developed markets, but because of the imports into these countries, their demands are actually met by the products that are on the market, despite there being a much lower level. If we do add Spain, Italy, Japan, etc., then that leaps up to 47, nearly 50%. And again, there would be a big gap there. So that's something to consider. Now, adding on top of this, I've already mentioned there's a number of tuna stocks that are that meet MSC requirements, that actually have on the sustainable pie chart or improving, that have frameworks in place. But we are faced with the clock being ticking. Now, tuna stocks that are certified or on the route for certification do need these harvest strategies in place. There is only one fishery that has the whole gamut of one tuna stock, sorry, that has the whole gamut of harvest control rules and harvest strategies in place, which is North Atlantic albacore. Everyone else needs work done. The clock is ticking. You can see here, this is a chart from the MSC, which sets out the deadlines required. The one that's keeping me awake at night is the West Central Pacific skipjack. Now, this is a huge MSC supplier, around about 800,000 tons a year. If there is no harvest control rule or harvest strategy in place by December 2021, then those fisheries are at risk of suspension. And what we'll see is that will have quite a severe impact on the availability of product. And who knows what that will relate to? Could it see markets moving away from this? Could it see a backward step in seafood sourcing? We just don't know. So pulling that all together, what does it mean? So I've tried to summarize those last set of slides. So there's not enough environmentally sustainable or environmentally responsible shelf-stable tuna for everyone that wants it, based on my assessment there. The situation is only going to get worse as new markets improve. This is unless things change on the water. The situation is going to get even worse if the existing certifications are lost due to suspension. And there's only about 13% of tuna production that's on a pathway towards sustainability through fisheries improvement projects. So unless we do something quickly, it's only that volume's going to change, and that's not enough. So it's all very well me setting out the doom and gloom. What are we trying to do about this situation? Now, tuna fisheries are managed by RFMOs, Regional Fisheries Management Organizations, and this is the current situation. You have NGOs with a very small voice, a small but important voice. They try to engage with the RFMO delegates. These are the decision makers. We also have the RFMO's own scientists through the scientific committee, but we also have the catching sector, and the catching sector has the loudest voice. They are influenced to some degree by the NGOs, particularly if they're fishing fisheries that require these improvements to be made. What we want to do is we want to change this landscape. We want to insert the supply chain into this dynamic. And you see, we're still going to work with NGOs. You may have noticed that the Global Tuna Alliance is actually one of the partners or one of the members of the NGO Tuna Forum. that Robin mentioned, and Robin actually is one of our steering committee members, so we have this two-way relationship. But what we really want to do is we want to start talking directly to the RFMO delegates and say, we represent the market and we need the following things to happen. But it's not just the delegates we can speak to, we can also speak to the catching sector, because the market buys from them ultimately. So this is how we're trying to change the situation. How are we doing that? Well, these are the specific asks of the RFMOs. The top line there sets out the asks we have of all 4 of the RFMOs that we engage with. And you can see very aligned with what Robin talked about. We also have independent asks of each of the 4 RFMOs there, and you can see some of them are quite specific, such as Mako shark conservation in the Atlantic and Mediterranean, but also the Indian Ocean, a rebuilding plan for yellowfin tuna, which is a particularly important market for GTA members. How do we do this? It's all very well having this strategy, but how do I get these busy retailers and companies, suppliers to actually engage? So firstly, and most importantly, we have participate in collaborative engagement and outreach, and I will come on to that in the next slide. But we also ask our partners to write to the delegations. So these are the actual countries that are represented at these meetings, to say, you know, maybe we're headquartered in you, or we buy tuna from you, or we support your tuna fisheries through the following, and we need you to do this, that, and the other. Before COVID, we would ask them to present the ask in person. Now it's tried to email or follow-up phone calls. Also, attending meetings is really important. It's very difficult to get members of the supply chain to come to the meetings. The meetings are often held in pretty remote places. It's a lot of time. It's 5 days often. It's a big ask of companies for people who are dealing with not just tuna. And so my job is to represent them at these meetings. But if they can attend, if they're held locally, it's hugely important to have that voice there. Finally, make a public statement. Be vocal and be public about what you're calling for. So this is what we ask our partners to do. I said collaborative engagement was important. These are the things that we do at the GTA. We engage with the decision makers directly. We also participate in stakeholder groups. For example, the UK government has an RFMO stakeholder group that takes on board the views of stakeholders to inform their position. So this is the kind of thing we do. We also engage with other delegations, such as the EU, for example. We build relationships and partnerships with NGOs, because many times we're saying the same thing. We do have a quite strong social media presence, and that just is a kind of a constant drumbeat of the messaging going on. And it also enables us to talk more widely through our partners' social media accounts. We try to attend RFMO meetings. We are doing that through observers as well. And capacity building is really important. That's when we actually talk through what we're trying to do with the people at the meetings. So nearly there, supply chain actions, this is the other side of the coin. So as well as engaging with the decision makers, our companies can engage through their own supply chains, and they can ask their suppliers to engage as well. They can say, right, we're asking the following, we need to see you do the following as well. They can also work with certified fisheries or fisheries in FIPS to say, these are the things you need to do to be successful. This is just one example of what we're doing with the Indian Ocean yellowfin. We have produced a report that calls for 25% effort cut in this fishery. That's been the basis of our advocacy. Our partners have been making statements about that too, and I'm going to show you some very quick examples. This is the first time I've ever seen an announcement like this, where you have Tesco's, one of the biggest retailers in the UK, saying we're going to stop sourcing for our own products if there isn't a rebuilding plan for Indian Ocean yellowfin. That got a very big reaction, as you can imagine. Co-op have made a similar thing, saying we don't currently buy this and we're not going to until things change. We also have an announcement from Prince's, which is a branded product, saying they're going to reduce their sourcing by 50% unless things change. And finally, Marks and Spencer's, which is a kind of quite a niche high-level retailer, again, is noting that they're going to review their sourcing decision, which is a very strong statement from them. Did that get any reaction at all? It did. It got a lot of press. It was in the Guardian, it was in the Independent, it was actually on the BBC World Service. It's also picked up in local news as well. And this is exactly what we want to see happen with this. This is our take home, oh, goodness me, gone backwards. But the quick take home message is we are an independent, fully independent collaborative of retailers and their suppliers and food service companies. We are really concerned with tuna sustainability, some key focuses including Indian Ocean yellowfin. We are advocating for specific things, and for yellowfin it's a 25% cut. and we're always on the lookout for new partners that can help manage our relationships with other delegates and amplify our voice. And very happy to answer any questions at the end. Thank you very much, Jackie.
Thank you, Tom, and so sorry again to have to come online to wrap it up. We are running quite short of time. We only have the system for another 12 minutes, I think, before it cuts us off. So, but Tom, excellent presentation. Really good to know that your organization is so deeply engaging with the RFMOs on behalf of industry. And that's a relief. If our membership also wants to start getting involved in policy decision making, we know we can do it through the GTA. Okay, so now to continue with the marketplace theme, I'm going to hand over to our final speaker today, Luke Clayton, who is the CEO and founder of WA Creations. So Luke is based in Hong Kong. He's originally from Australia, first visited Japan in 1987 and then lived in Tokyo for 25 years. And after attending Japanese high school and graduating from the university in both Japan and Melbourne, he went on to hold senior positions as a managing director at investment banks such as Goldman Sachs during his more than 20 years of career in finance. He resigned from finance to focus on current and future restaurant projects. And as founder of WA Creations, Luke is closely involved in all aspects of establishing and managing the projects there, with Japanese restaurants in multiple locations, which he'll talk to. So I'll leave it to Luke to provide you an overview of his company, the restaurants in the region, and also to give us a biased perspective locally and regionally on tuna trading, some of the sustainability concerns he has, and also some of the cultural dynamics to be aware of in Asia. So I'm going to pass over to you, Luke. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Just given the time, I'll be as short as possible. Originally, I was interested in dialing into this call to get a better understanding and educate myself, and ended up being on the panel, which is great, and I've already learned a lot, so I'm glad I'm here. Basically, like everybody else, aware of and alarmed by the overfishing, and then thinking about what we can do as far as our company is concerned. And step one, obviously, is to get educated. Hence, like I said, participation in this call. We'd definitely love to explore being part of the coalition of the willing. But first, I'd like to give a little overview of the company. I'll keep it very brief. So, WA Creations is the company. Sorry, excuse me. The definition of WA. It's very clear there. One word there is key: harmony. Harmony with nature, I guess, is an important aspect. Here are our partnerships where we have our restaurants located, basically in Japan, Hong Kong and Macau. So we're in Hokkaido, Tokyo, Kyoto, Osaka, Australia, Hong Kong and Macau. And this is just some shots to give you a sense of what we do. So we operate 11 restaurants, 6 of them are sushi restaurants. All of them serve tuna with varying degrees of volume. Our sushi restaurants easily serve the most tuna. But when we talk about volume, keep in mind we're talking a maximum of 3 tiny pieces of sushi per customer. So we're talking about the akami, the red tuna, the chutoro, medium fatty, and the otoro, the fatty tuna. We have a total of only 120 seats. We focus on exclusive Japanese fine dining. If you look at our tuna consumption, just my understanding is that the average, adult bluefin tuna weighs between 220 to 250 on average. Our largest restaurant, as far as capacity is concerned, in 2019 purchased 420 kilos of bluefin tuna, paying around $280 US a kilogram. So let's say we consume 2 full-grown tuna annually at this restaurant. And I was just, shocked by some of the numbers I've seen. 5 million tons being fished globally. As Dr. Hilario pointed out, 1% of that is bluefin. The dilemma of sustainability of bluefin, I think it's a lot of the issues that I've seen in Japan is the mindset. The suppliers that I've spent discussing the issue with basically left me feeling fairly pessimistic. They're aware of the situation. They know that demand is outstripping supply. They don't seem to have a plan B once it's all gone, heaven forbid, and they basically have the view that once it's gone, we'll find the next product to sell. Now, the fish market in Japan, as you know, a lot of history there, but also a lot of politics. A few years ago, I thought about getting Japan's greatest chefs, a lot of the Michelin chefs who we work with, and basically having them agree to remove tuna from the menu for a set period of time. Now, how long would they remove it? Would that have any impact whatsoever? Never got that far, but it was really more about raising awareness. You know, how do we really solve this problem? Is a moratorium possible? You know, I would say governments need to get involved, and basically you would have to see, I think, the government subsidizing if people, I'm talking about the Japanese fishermen, were going to down tool and hopefully let the supplies come back. This may be a very naive approach, but then if you also look at the chefs themselves, you know, bluefin tuna has always been a desired ingredient at sushi restaurants. They also, similar to the fish market, sadly have a view that they're aware supply is down, prices up. Eventually, it could go to zero, and heaven forbid they'd have to move to farmed tuna. There's definitely a negative bias towards farmed tuna as far as the taste perspective is concerned. We're aware as a company that one company recently in northeastern Japan was awarded, well, the first company I believe to be awarded the Marine Stewardship Council's Global Standard for Sustainable Fishing of Endangered Bluefish Tuna. We've been in contact with them. We're talking to them about how we can start to source our tuna through them. This is just an early conversation, and it's going to require a lot of other conversations because, like I said, we have the chefs, the master chefs, we have and the relationships that they have with the fish suppliers, which have been, in some cases, you know, for over 40 years. So it's a complex situation. That's really the update I wanted to give you from my perspective. Thanks for your time.
Excellent. Thank you, Luke. Really nice and succinct, and so good to get a perspective on bluefin because, as the other speakers pointed out, this was not part of their focus, except for Hilario did show us the science, and also surprising that, you know, only 1% of that is actually bluefin. But given the value and what it's worth in Asia, hence the importance of mentioning it. So, you know, thank you very much for bringing that up. Okay, I'm just going to ask all the speakers to come back on, if they can just put their webcams on. And we're going to go into very quick question and answers discussion. We've only got about 5 minutes left, but we have got a question here. I'll call it out, and the panelists, whoever feels they want to respond, they can. As a relatively small importer of tuna into Hong Kong, what would the panelists what would the panelists suggest the importer to do, and what would they like to see them working on as a relatively small importer of tuna into Hong Kong? Any suggestions there from any of the panelists?
Yeah, I can certainly jump in there, Jackie. Yeah, it's a good question, and I wouldn't worry too much about size. It's with collaborative engagement, having even just one company from a particular region gives us a legitimate reason to speak as a whole with the managers of that region. So, for example, with Hong Kong, it gives us an opportunity to speak to the Chinese delegation to say, you know, stakeholders who are from your region are calling for action. So that just having that representation is hugely important on a sort of a holistic approach.
Okay, good. So I suppose that also brings in what is the role of the Hong Kong Sustainable Seafood Coalition and what you would like to see coming out from the HKSSC perhaps. So if anybody else would like to respond on that, please do. Okay, I hear silence. So I think Tom's pretty much covered that already. So that's good. So regardless of volume, we can be a voice, and we can also be an access to governments, which is very clear. Okay, so I want to ask a question for all the panelists. And this is going to also Holly Kula, if you'd like to come online. I don't know if you can get your webcam on, but certainly if you can unmute yourself, and I'd love to get your voice here. If you had the power, what is the one thing that you would do to make tuna more responsible? So perhaps just a couple of sentences from each speaker. Maybe I'll turn to Luke first. If you had the power, what is the one thing you would do to make tuna more responsible?
I just want to raise awareness with the people we're working with in the industry that I work within right now, and just educate, because I think there is a lot of myths out there. There's a lot of data out there. I think there's a lot of misinformation. So I think awareness is something I'd like to focus on.
Good, excellent. Thanks, Luke. Robin?
Yes, for me, I think it's clearly transparency. And you saw that as one of the core areas of focus of the forum around things like observer coverage, for example, and electronic monitoring. There are still a lot of gaps in knowledge about what is happening with stocks and what's happening on the water. Being able to fill those gaps with data makes it so much easier for us to do the other work that we need to do to manage tuna stocks for long-term sustainability.
Okay, thank you. Hilario?
For me, it will be collaboration. I think that scientists, NGOs, managers, we need to collaborate based on facts that the science provides. Maybe listen each other and see what will be the common goals to progress on the sustainability of tunas. But working together, I think it's the only way. And sometimes, as you mentioned in your introduction, the issue of highly migratory transboundary species are very difficult to deal with within the tuna RFMOs because there are different objectives and there are a lot of trade-offs, but I think that working together will be the only possibility to ensure the sustainability of tunas.
Brilliant, so collaboration. Thanks, Hilario. And Tom, finally, if you had the power.
Yeah, it'd be comprehensive harvest strategies for all tuna stocks or tuna fisheries.
Okay, good. And I think you guys, as your respective organizations, you're already working on a lot of these issues. So I think if the Hong Kong Sustainable Seafood Coalition and the marketplace in general in Hong Kong wanted to get more involved in sustainable tuna sourcing, then either it's the GTA or encouraging partnership with NGO Tuna Forum or working closely with the ISF are key routes to doing that. So I think we don't have any more time. I'm worried the system's going to switch off. So I would like to just be able to wrap up before it does. I'd also just like to say a big thank you to Luke for coming on board. As he mentioned, he thought he was going to be rather listening to the webinar, but instead we pulled him onto the panel because very rarely do you get a tuna trader who's willing to just come up and be exposed. And I think it's very, very useful. Yeah, thank you, Luke. Very useful to have you on board.
I learned a lot. Thank you very much, guys. Much appreciated.
Excellent. And this is just the beginning. We are starting to do a bit more focus on species for our membership. We started with tuna this month. Next month, we're going to cover a couple of others. We're also going to be doing a soft launch of our seafood risk assessment website at the end of November. So please do sign in for that. And we're going to start providing some profiles, species profiles for the general public for free. So just to make this all open access, linking into websites like the ISSF and using very much the science that they're producing as well. Okay, so that's it from us. A big thank you to everyone. I'm also going to be circulating by email, or our secretariat at the HKSSC will be circulating information on how to get involved with the ISSF, for example, membership with the other organizations, and we'll take it from there. Just a big thank you to everyone, and appreciate you being here this morning and afternoon and evening.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Cheers, everyone. All the best.
Bye.
Thanks, Aaron.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.